just what does it mean for you to have the opportunities that you do being a female? We know that there's a lot of people that are on this panel that have broken some of the barriers, and we thank you for that. So I'm going to start with you, Paula.
Um, my biggest thing that I always say, the opportunities that I had was when I always say that people could be somebody's hero. And when I was 7 years old, a big burly man let a little girl play on the boys soccer team. I grew up in a very small town that a lot of people didn't get out, probably a little bit lower class situation. And when it came to the situation where I was ready to go to college, my parents said, "We can't afford it. Your sister's already going." And I was very fortunate that Jim Rudy at the time saw something in me to give me a full ride to go to college and have the opportunity to get out of my town and now influence all the other women I have the ability to do. And I feel that's a really major part of my job. And so the sport was able to get me to get a degree and be very successful at that, but a career, and not just a career just in sport, but a career to help other people achieve their dreams, goals, and become strong, successful women. And something that I focus a lot on my coaching, because I think if we do that, then they're going to be successful on the field. And I can't tell people how lucky I feel to have that opportunity, because I know some people don't. And we always focus on football and basketball and big schools and power fives and all the money. But what people don't realize is that the opportunity is given to young women to be successful. Because of that, there's the Paula Wilkins from Middletown, Pennsylvania, who got a chance to be successful because of it. So that's a really important thing to me.
Thank you for that. And Rachel, just in your intro and learning so much about how you've influenced women in sports, especially at UMass, the same question goes to you. What does it mean for you to have the opportunities that you have being a female and being a strong female in that?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I think sports and law enforcement are places that are very male dominated. And I find it really interesting looking around this Zoom, right, that there are so many of you that have cracked into that. And yes, you're all gorgeous, but you have to know what you're talking about too, right? So, I am so proud to see that there are women doing things that, I'm about to be 50, so it's a very big deal, but like that I never would have thought in my lifetime I'd see it, like a vice president, right? But also, not just officials in games, but that there are exceptional coaches. And when I think about who are obviously I hope we all had parents or guardians that loved us and cared for us, but coaches are really people that have taught me so many life lessons. And what I love about sports is it teaches you the long game, right? Like, it's the great equalizer, right? When I went to Buckingham Brown and Nichols, it's a private school in Cambridge. It wasn't that I was Black that made me realize. It was the first time I realized, like, oh my God, we're poor. And we were just working class, but it was a super rich school where I was embarrassed. We lived in a house. I mean, my parents are like, we're fine. But it really felt like the cultural shock of me going there. And you know what? Sports knocked all of that down, because nobody cares if your father built that wing of that building. If you don't like listen to the coach or feel entitled or have a crappy attitude, they don't care what color you are. Like, are you coalition building, right? Are you able to look at a team with no trades and find the best qualities of these 7 people right now to get us what we need, right? What are we going to say to make it happen, whether it's true or not? And those are the things that I feel like as a leader now, as a CEO of a 350 person prosecutor's office, there are crises that are real that I'm dealing with. Unfortunately, life and death, and it's not the same as a triple overtime game. And am I going to take the shot? But I feel like my life has prepared me for that in all of it. And I know that you can't just show up unprepared and expect to win. And sports taught me all of those things. And Paula, like you, I'm the oldest of 5. My parents told me, we paid for you to get into, this much, for you to get into this wealthy private school. You will go to college, but we're not paying for you. So either get smarter or get faster or get better. But like, you got to get something to get out of here and move forward. And Patty Bossio gave me a scholarship at UMass, and it was great. It was life altering. And I feel like I met even as a diverse person, my dad's family is from Mayo, Ireland, and my mom's family is originally from Barbados. It was the first time I met so many other people that were so many other things, right? Like from different countries. And I have just a warm place in my heart for UMass, but sports has opened all those doors for me.
I think we all have a very special place in our heart for UMass. Heather, I know that you do as well. So what does it mean for you to have these opportunities that you do as a female?
I mean, it means the absolute world. Like I'm getting to do what I love every single day, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without UMass and the female leaders that I had at UMass. It's really great to hear similar stories on this call tonight. I came from a single family household. My mom raised 7 children and very low income, and sports really opened the door for me to be able to attend college on a full scholarship. Thankful for Coach Julie, who like saw the potential out in me as just like some girl from Peabody who wasn't really that great at the time. And she brought me under her wing. And not only did coming to UMass give me like an education that I might not have gotten or been able to afford otherwise, but it gave me the family that like the emotional family that I never really had. Like I always go back to people at UMass for connections. And it was so cool to be put into perspective because Julie was like the inaugural member of the women's team, like at UMass. So I remember thinking about that all the time and being like, well, here I am. Like when I felt like I was taking things for granted as a student athlete at UMass, I'm like, Coach Julie like had to like fight her way to be able to compete as a woman on the teams here. So it was really great to see all those female leaders in those positions and see all the female leaders on this call tonight and how much they've accomplished and how much UMass helped them get to where they are today. So, and yeah, I'm just really grateful every day that I get to be a woman competing in the first place, but also like competing like past the college level and doing what I love. So yeah.
Thank you. And Pam, you've obviously had quite a career and are continuing that wild career as a head coach. So being a female and a head coach, how has that kind of been in your whole journey after UMass?
Yeah, I think field hockey is a little unique because in the United States, it is predominantly women. Unfortunately, we don't have a college competitive system for the men field hockey players. So, I was a 3-sport athlete growing up, and I still think that is super important because I had the opportunity to get coached by both female and males. And I think what I appreciated from all my coaches was the way they treated us as capable people. We weren't women, like we had tough coaches, and some of my toughest coaches were female, and some of my sweetest coaches were the guys. But it all comes together to help you feel, just I think the power, the independence, the self-esteem that a coach can really, really help develop at a young age. And I think that gave me the confidence to follow. How it turned into field hockey. We got a color TV when I was 9 years old. And I remember thinking, and the first thing I saw was the Winter Olympics, but the colors of those opening ceremonies, I remember going, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And at the time, how am I going to do this?
Mhm.
How is a female going to make the Olympics if I'm not a gymnast? I was already like, I don't even know, 125 pounds, 5'7", like that's not going to happen. Like, how is it going to be that I can reach that dream? And we had a woman from my hometown, I'm from Somerset, Mass, named Sue Marcellus, who was the first to get a field hockey scholarship at Ohio State. And she made the 1980 team. And in 1980, it was the first time that field hockey was in the Olympics. And I thought, that's how I'm going to do it. If this can work out, I'm going to commit to that. And she's from my high school. She ran a camp because unfortunately the 80 Olympics were boycotted, and she had come back and taught me so much, gave me such wise words as a young, I was 13, and carried that with me. And that was really significant. And I think the opportunity that field hockey gave me was to continue to build kind of my stamina, right, as a young woman, just to figure out what my values were and how to collaborate, because I loved being on a team. I love that idea of working with the people around me to create something greater. And so it's been an awesome journey. My PE teachers, huge influences on me to see them be the healthy and strong women and men that they were. And I have an aunt who's, I think she's on this tonight too. She was a great influence, a PE teacher and a coach in her own right, but in a whole different era, right? In the 60s, 70s, like when things were so different. So where I am today, I feel a huge responsibility to those women. I just had my boss retire. Jackie Seiler is a legend in women's basketball collegiate. She was here for 40 some years. You know, that's the generation that I feel a huge responsibility for, to help make this a better place and then make it attractive and make it something exciting and passionate for these younger women to continue with. As I continued to coach internationally, it became very different. It's very male dominated. And so there was this adjustment, but I think it's because I played other sports and I had great interactions with both the men and the women as coaches and teammates. I thought I was going to be an ice hockey player, but there was no ice hockey. So I played pond hockey my whole life, or street hockey with all the boys in my figure skates. So, you know, you figure it out. And so I think those are the opportunities they give me, and a responsibility that I feel that I'm very proud of. And I'm still so excited and passionate about that to this day.
The fact that you just picked, you're like, how can I get to the Olympics? Let me figure it out. And then you picked one thing and you did it is inspiring as all heck. So congratulations on that. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. And Hannah, I want to start with you. How do you think being a student athlete prepared you for the experience and the role that you occupy this day?
Yeah, so being a student athlete really is the foundation of why I am where I am today. Like I said before, I grew up playing sports. I grew up a 3-sport athlete as well, and playing ice hockey when I was little. I swam. I did all the different sports under the sun. But when it came down to it, when it came to college sports, it's such a different level, as everybody here knows. It's just the main thing that I got from it was like time management, simple things like you're waking up, you have lift, you have practice, you have to go to study hall, you have to find time to study on your own, you're going to class. And then on top of that, it's like traveling, all that stuff. So you're learning how to balance all that. And with this new job as an area scout with the Giants, it just, everything I'm doing, I have been preparing for my whole life because of being a student athlete. So things like when I have really long days from waking up at 6 and then going to bed at midnight or whatever it is, or I'm on the road, there are times where we'll be out on the road for a week or two. And like that, we did that with playing lacrosse. Like we're traveling, we have to balance getting our homework done, doing tests on the road, all that stuff. So just having those experiences really prepared me for that. And then on top of that, the mental toughness of just being a student athlete and just competing. I think like when you're trying to pass your run test or whatever it is, like you're trying to push through that last rep and you're with your teammates or you're having a bad day, you're not playing well, you had a bad game, like being able to bounce back mentally was such an important part of what we were doing. And that goes straight into my job too. It's like when you face those barriers or you're like second guessing yourself, you have to just remember where you came from, remember that you're prepared for what you're doing. And you have to be mentally tough, especially being a woman like in the NFL. You have to just kind of be one of the guys almost. You just have to you have to blend in, you have to just attack it with that approach. And I think that just playing sports, and like everybody else here said, I grew up playing like tackle football in my backyard with like some of my best guy friends. So it's like I've always been around that, and it's just normalizing it. And I'm really hoping that one day we can kind of get to the point where it is normal to see women in football, and it's normal to see women coaches, and it's normal to see women scouts. So, but man, being a student athlete, especially at UMass, my coaches, my teammates, like I owe so much to them because it just really helped prepare me for where I am today.
Rachel, I'll ask you the same question, just how being a student athlete has helped prepare you for everything that you're doing today.
Yeah, it's multitasking, right? And for me, the point I made, it's not when I'm on TV when somebody's murdered, right? So, but it does matter. As one of 3 of 11 DAs in Massachusetts, they'll talk about my appearance and not, some of my male colleagues, or I'm like, are you kidding me? He's shaped like the penguin, right? And no one's talking about what he looks like. But anyways, you have to be exceptional. right? Like as women, we don't get to fail upwards. That just doesn't happen for us. And certainly as women in male dominated fields, Hannah, if you were mediocre, you wouldn't be the first woman to get this job. There's not like affirmative action regarding like, we need a woman in here. You have to be qualified to do your job. And for me, it's that sort of requirement of, you know, even as a lawyer, you might beat me, but it is not because you were more prepared than I was. You might beat me because, I don't know, the ball bounced that way and not this way, but it's not because I haven't done every single rep that I was supposed to do when we were going to work out, that I wasn't pool running as hard as I could in the morning, that I didn't do all of the other things I was supposed to do. So I think the multitasking piece. And then for me now, you know, I will say many of the women CEOs in the country, when you look back at them, a lot of them were athletes, right? And we learn how to coalition build, right? It's negotiating, it's mediating, it's all of those things together. And I would venture to guess that many of the women on this panel were not just athletes, but you were the captain of your team, right? And so we know this. We've all had teammates that were exceptionally gifted in royal you-know-whats, right? And nobody, we loved, you know, yeah, you scored a goal, but it's like, okay, there's 9 other people out here, but congratulations, right? Or there's the nicest person in the world who's just not a very good athlete, and they're wonderful too. You have to be a mixture of both of those things, right? In order for your teams to look at you to lead them. And one of the things I said when I was campaigning was, you know, same as you, I was a 3-sport athlete, and there was not a single team that I was on where ultimately I was not voted the captain. And I add to that, not just it's an all women's team, but often I was the only visibly melanated person on the team, right? And nobody gave a shit, excuse my language, because they were just like, all right, she's great and she's where she's supposed to be, let's go. But when you feel other, right? When you feel other in whatever other way, that is what is so beautiful about sports. Is sports doesn't care that your parents didn't make it to this game, or your parents were just arrested and your aunt had to, like, whatever the story is that I hope none of you have. Sports doesn't care. You just get to play, and it is what it is. And like Heather said with track, the thing that I love about track is it's just the number. My daughter is a hurdler, and shout out to my little ladybug, you know, #1 freshman in the country in the 55. But that is the biggest gift that I feel like I've given her, is be as good as you can and don't wait. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're just a freshman, you know, or you're in 8th grade. You can't play on varsity because it's never happened before. Do it. Be the first to do it. And that's the sort of student athlete spirit I think we get.
It's all about breaking barriers. We're certainly in the process of doing that now. So thank you, Rachel. Now, Paula, how do you think your experience as a student athlete has helped prepare you to coach?
Well, I just think I would talk similar to what Rachel said, was that if you ever got in a room with 30 other women, they're not all going to get along. They're just not. And so I think for me, the big experience I have, and Rachel's right, I was the captain of my team, was that learning, and I didn't learn this until after I'd done it, but learning to help communicate, build relationships, understand and know what motivates people. It made me more intuitive to help people be successful. I think Rachel is correct that you're going to have the star that you're going to have to figure out how to get them into the team to be successful. I went to a national team event and I never played a minute. It was the first time I had never played, and it made me recognize how valuable the non-starters were. But I didn't recognize that until it actually happened to me. And so being able to get everyone to buy into something. And so I'm always intrigued to go into like business or something like that, because I want to know if it kind of translates, but I think it does. Like, you know, people just miss it. They need to know people's motivations and their stories. We all have stories. We all have backstories. We all have things, demons that were chasing us, or, you know, mommy or daddy issues, whatever they are. But once you know that, you can get people to do amazing things. And that's what I love about coaching. And teaching my players that when they go on to the business world, or they're going to be doctors or whatever, that they have to do the same thing, right? That they have to figure it out. So educating them is to know people's stories and figure out how to motivate them to be successful. It's really one of the most amazing things I learned as a student athlete. And I know it's all time management and everything like that, but like really learning to deal with people and understanding that, if somebody comes to practice and they're in a bad mood, it might not be about you. It might not be about that. And to reach out to them and find out what it is to help them be successful. And that really, I didn't learn it until years later into coaching, but that really is what I found from being a student athlete.
I think that's a lesson too that a lot of us have learned over this COVID period is just the importance of mental health, and you might not know what people are dealing with, and just being that extra ear for someone just to be there. And I know that when you're a part of a team, that naturally happens, and it's important to build off of that. So Pam, I'm interested in your take as well on how being a student athlete has correlated into your coaching career.
Yeah, I think for the most part, when I think back, and it was a while ago, but I think with being a student athlete, there's a response, again, the kind of word, the responsibility. There was a lot that I didn't realize that I had to continue to give towards my improvement. You get to college, you're there, you've been a natural athlete, you love to train, you love to, but it's not with this real focus and real purpose, if you will. And, the coaches can only do so much until you go out there. And I remember, and part of it had to do with wanting, to get better. We had a JV team back then. So my freshman year, you were a little bit on JV, a little bit of varsity, and you kind of work your way and you're trying to get yourself to, that varsity team consistently. And I remember carrying my stick around on the buses and all, just so when I had some free time, I could work on some little things. And those little things made a huge difference. If I could work on my pulls getting a little faster, all of a sudden there it was on the field and a senior is saying something to me about it. And I'm just like, really? Oh my gosh. Like so I can translate a lot of that experience to my teams now, that you've got to give some of this energy, and you've got to give some of your own time to think about your own improvement. It's not just up to the coaches. And that has helped me with everything I've done, is that, okay, hang on, I'm in charge of my improvement or my success. And and look at all these resources around me that can help me. And so it has to come from within first. And I think that's a lesson that, I'm going through meetings right now with our kids just to get them. We have this really new spring season now, which because of COVID, we've never had a hockey spring season. So how do you've got to kind of redirect them and get them prepared. And I'm sure Paul is feeling the same thing. You kind of get them prepared for this competitive season. So I think that's it. Where is their intrinsic motivation, and make sure they don't lose that as they move on.
Thank you so much for all those answers. Now, Heather, I want to ask you a question about the challenges and hurdles that you faced being a female in the role that you're in now. If you can take us through some of those challenges and maybe how you overcame them.
Yeah, of course. I think track and field is a great sport as far as equalizing men and women. I think you find it really often, at least in the US, that with post-collegiate female and male athletes, and even collegiate, a lot of female programs are fully funded. And for post-collegiate, women tend to be more marketable, which is kind of a double-edged sword for companies. So a lot of women are getting equal contracts to men. But again, like I said, it's a double-edged sword because a lot of women are getting contracts based on their appearances as well as their athletic performances, whereas men can be just focusing on their athletic performances. And I know I struggle with that a lot because I'm expected to keep up this big social media presence, and it takes away a little bit of my own authenticity if I'm posting all these things I don't really want to be posting, and men are just expected to perform, and that takes a little bit away from my athletic performance as well, because you're expected to kind of put on this face and this show for the cameras because you're always being judged on it, whereas men just go out and do their thing and run their race and that's it. And I was actually just talking about this with my teammates because we just got new uniforms, and we always talk about how the males at the company make the final decision when it comes to our uniforms. And oftentimes our uniforms are really cool, but sometimes they're not as flattering for women because of the color of the bottoms or the fabric or material on the bottoms. And we had this instance a few years ago where we all posted a picture in like, these tiny briefs and like a sports bra because we just raced, and the picture was circulating around the internet, and like there was just harassment in the comments. And I just think that that's not something that men really think about having to deal with all the time. And it takes a little bit away from like the people focusing on just the woman's athletic performance. They're focusing on how is she presenting herself? Like, what are her political beliefs? Like, why is she acting like she can have other interests outside of just her sport? And I actually just saw in the comments that Katie said she saw me on TV this weekend, and it's really cool because I feel like I've seen almost all of you on ESPN at this point, except for Rachel, but I've seen Rachel on TV all the time since I'm from the Boston area. And I think that's really great that women are starting to get more and more exposure. But that's another thing where women just get less exposure when it comes to, I mean, it's track and field in general, but also being a female athlete, you can be just as good as a male athlete from another sport and no one knows who you are. And obviously that impacts your financial stability because you're not getting as much money if you're not being shown on TV as much, because like obviously people and companies will sponsor athletes that are shown more on the TV. So yeah, I think that those are like the main challenges definitely that I face as a female athlete in this field, and collegiately and post-collegiately.
I don't think there's a question on here that I personally can relate to more, being a female reporter in sports and just constantly having to prove myself that I know what I'm talking about, and also dealing with the appearance situation. Heather, I fully understand what you're going through with that, because God forbid you have an off day on how you look, then anything that's coming out of your mouth just goes to the wayside, and it shouldn't be that way. And if there was a male on camera talking about the Super Bowl coming up or whatever it may be, it's a very different situation. So I understand the hurdles when it comes to being a female in the sports industry in that capacity. And Paula, I'm interested to hear from your perspective, just the challenges and hurdles that you feel like you've had to overcome.
I think the biggest one that I would talk about is when I was a young head coach. I'm very passionate about taking care of my players and making sure they have the right care, making sure that they get the right adequate, equipment and facilities and everything like that. And I understand, football and basketball get a bunch of different things, but when I feel it's necessary, I will fight for my players. And when I was very young, I was probably not as tempered, but I would be considered emotional. I'd be considered bossy, and people would just make assumptions about me that I was this highly aggressive, out for everyone, like type of person. And I was just really passionate about my players. And it was interesting. At one point in one of the schools that I was at, we were talking about, I was very upset about how our game field was. It wasn't taken care of very well. I had talked about it for 2 years, and they kept saying, you're just being a little bossy, you're being a little pushy, don't be so passionate about this, it's whatever. And the male coach came, a new male coach was hired, and within 30 days, he said something, and he was very gruff of how he said it. It all changed. And I was just so disappointed with the fact that I was emotional and I was too over the top with stuff. And he was way more emotional and over the top than I was. But because I was a woman, it wasn't the same. And it was so telling and so devastating. And it was just like, I just walked away. Like, I've been saying this for 2 years. And I think I've become a lot more savvy to know how I do it. And I also think that when administrators have gotten to know me, that perception has completely changed. And so you just hope that people spend the time to understand that about you, that you're not a woman or a male, that you're a person who is passionate about what they do. And that doesn't make you emotional about it. So I think that was one of the most telling things that had happened to me as a female coach. And it happens all the time, right? We're emotional. We don't think through it, right? Or that. So I think that's one thing I would like to see changed a little bit in that. And the surprising thing, one of the administrators was a woman. And so I think we go back, and I make all my team read Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, because I really think that women have to support women. And I think even from administrative roles, as me talking to my players, that's the same thing. I have to treat them with the right respect. So when they move on, they understand that it's not being emotional, it's not being whatever. It's you have to respect people for who they are, not the gender.
I just saw something. I wish I could pull up exactly the quote, but it was talking about men versus women and women in general. And it said like something to the extent of, if you're being friendly, you're considered being flirty. And if you're being, if you're trying to be assertive, then you're considered a bitch. And it kind of went back and forth. And it's so true. And there's barriers that we just need to keep working at to break down. So I know that everyone on this panel is definitely doing their job. And Hannah, I'm interested in your take on this and some of the challenges that you faced in your career.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously working in a predominantly male industry in the NFL and with different teams, you definitely come across things here and there. And I think the main thing for me, it's like constantly trying to prove yourself, and not only like prove yourself to other people, but like prove to yourself that you belong. Cause when you walk into a room, or you walk into for me, it was like walking into the draft room for the first time and with the Falcons, and I'm like the only woman in the room, and I'm looking around and I'm like, wow, like it's pretty eye-opening. And so it's like you have to be on top of your game times 10, and you have to be knowledgeable, but that much more knowledgeable. And so because it's like everybody said, like if you slip up once, it's like all of a sudden it comes into question, does she really know what she's talking about? Does she know what's going on? Like, is she equipped? Like, so, and that's the same thing, like I said before, for me too. It's just like when I walk in a room being like, no, like I belong here. I worked like my tail off to get to where I am. And, just having that belief in yourself, but not self-sabotaging. Like, not, if you start thinking about it and you start thinking about, oh, I'm the only woman in the room. Oh, like, what if I mess up? Oh, what if I say the wrong thing? Like, what if for me, it's like, oh, what if my evaluation is like way off or whatever it is? It's like, well, I know that, like I've always said, and comes back to the lacrosse thing, like at the end of the day, like if I can look myself in the mirror and say, like, I did everything I could to either get playing time or be the best person I can for my team or be the best captain I can. And it's like the same thing right now. Like if I can say that I'm doing everything in my power to prepare and do everything I can to be the best scout that I can, then when I go into those meetings and when I'm presenting and I have my evaluations written, then you just got to let it go, and you have to let it, whatever happens, happens. And so for me, it's just a constant mental battle with that, and just the proving yourself to other people, but mostly to myself, just trying to get past that. And, that's definitely one of the biggest barriers.
Pam, I want to ask you a question in particular. One of our attendees asked Bill, he said, have you noticed changes in attitude towards women athletes or other careers across your career? And do you have any examples of that?
So
think-
as in for like towards women who are athletes and then going into the business?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like I've definitely found that having a background in athletics in some sort, like for me, I didn't play football. So like that's a big thing too, because I feel like there's this like big perception out there, like, oh, if you're working in the NFL, like you probably play football, which is just not true, because there are so many scouts, so many like people that work in football in the player personnel department that have never set foot in the field. But it's like when you're a woman and you're automatically assumed, oh, she didn't play football, which is also may or may not be true because there are women's leagues now. So it's like there's this big perception out there, oh, if you didn't play football, how does she know what she's talking about? But it's like, I think having that lacrosse background, that athlete background, like definitely helps me for everything that I'm doing, because at least it's like, hey, she played a sport in college, like she played competitive, like Division I lacrosse. She understands what, especially for player evaluation, because it's like, oh, well, I know what athleticism looks like. Like I know what quickness, what burst, what speed is. Like so much of what I'm evaluating is very similar to what you need in lacrosse. So it's like, and that's what, when my boss was interviewing me, he's like, hey, we love that you have this lacrosse background because it's laid this foundation for you for evaluation. And I think that a lot of companies, especially with the NFL, I know, and like the MLB, NBA, look for that. So it's like really awesome to see a lot of these girls, and especially at UMass, has an awesome sport management program, and just seeing these women that are kind of taking that path and using the being an athlete as a platform, it's definitely helpful and has helped me out tremendously.
A great sport management program. All right, Pam, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah, I think for sure it has changed. The perception has changed. And I think over time, if you think back to, when we were coming out of college, I'm not sure how much being a member of a field hockey team, even though we went to the Final Four, we were always in the top 10. I don't know how much that enhanced my resume for some things. Yes, I went into coaching, so obviously it's important. But I mean, for some of my others, however, I think once many of my teammates got jobs, they did very well in their role because of their experience being on a team, having, maybe been a captain, or how to get along in a group, how to, share the responsibility, how to take orders, how to give orders, how to be a leader, how to be a follower, how to, like, all of these things happen within there. But what I can say now is, with more and more opportunity having been open to young girls, more dads have girls playing. And so these are the dads who are in these hiring positions. If right now, I mean, we're working our way up, but for some of these big corporations, they are guys. And I will tell you right now, at Duke, one of the things that have blown my mind is when they have these career days, the number one things I'm hearing from these top companies is, I want a female student athlete, because they are coming in with a level of confidence. They are coming in without having to, the old stereotype. These men want these women who can get the job done. It's not for any other gender reason, except that they're going to prove themselves. They're going to get out there and work with others. They are going to, strive to be as good as they can, but also, it is in our nature, I think, to want our team to do well, want our company to do well. Even though I want to advance and I want to move up the ladder, I still have the big picture in mind. And I think it's so awesome to see, where our graduates go, and feel that you have a huge role in helping them be successful, just by helping them grow within your program. So I do think it is a huge asset for young women to get involved somehow in a team, environment, and put themselves out there, because it will pay off no matter what your career choice is after.
So we got about 10 minutes left. So I want to go through everyone in the panel with one final question. And this also kind of goes off of our good friend Katie is 12 years old and she's on right now. And she said, I'm 12, I'm planning to run track and field in high school and in college. Do you have any advice? So I would love to open this up to our panelists. And it doesn't just have to be obviously track and field, but just what advice would you give young girls aspiring to be an athlete or be in your shoes one day, whether it's your career path or what you've decided to do in life? So we'll start with you, Heather.
Hi, Katie. I'm excited for you to do high school and track and field in college and high school. That's really great that you are aspired to do that. My one piece of advice would definitely be life obstacles are going to get in the way of what you're doing. Don't let that distract you or permanently distract you from your end goal, whether your end goal is something really big, like becoming a scout for the NFL or becoming a DA, or your end goal is just like, hey, I just want to like make it through my 4 years of college and get my graduate with the degree. I went through a lot, and growing up as a member of a like low income single family household, and I had a lot of hard things happen to me during my time in college, and I just tried to stay focused the whole time and say, hey, like, I really want this education. Like, I want to be able to get my master's degree. And a lot of people and a lot of life will happen in between and it will push you, but just stick to your guts. And I know women experience this all the time with people really pushing their buttons, and just focus on your end goal, make those goals for yourself, and support other women when they're making goals for themselves too, because we get enough pushback from men. Like, we need to support each other, and that's really important. Paula mentioned that in a really great book. So definitely support each other and support yourself in the process.
It's a great answer. All right, Rachel, I'm going to ask you the same question. What advice would you give young women or girls aspiring to be an athlete or be in your shoes one day?
So 12 years old, track. I'm dying to know what Katie runs. And is she like track or field or what does she love
No,
to do?
Katie, you gotta
Um,
tell us.
I know, Katie, put it in the chat. So we got to figure it out. But I love that even at 12, she's thinking about this. What's different between, and I'm old, Katie, but like we didn't have, barely had like YouTube where I can look up Heather and see every single race she's ever run. I can watch her form. I can see what she does. If you're a hurdler, if you're doing shot put, if you are a triple jumper, if you are a distance runner, whatever you are, you get to see experts in their craft, right? And what's beautiful is Pam and I are a little bit older maybe than some of the other people, but Pam, is there footage from, the Olympics? There must be, from when you played. Like there are excellent people in every single sort of generation that we can go back and watch and see. That's what's beautiful about excellence, is that it's there whether you're old or not, right? And so at 12, I just love that you're thinking about doing it. And I would say, enjoy it, right? Really try to enjoy it. I check in with my daughter all the time, who, is now, we're flying to Virginia for a track meet because everything's closed down locally. And she's a junior now and she wants to get her times down because she wants to go to and I just want to make sure she's still having fun, because at the end of the day, I know, Pam, that you have to be exceptional and put in the work, but if you don't still get butterflies in a great way right before the whistle blows or right before something happens, if it's a dread, I don't want to be involved in something like that. So at 12, you better be enjoying yourself, Katie, and you're going to get better, right? Like you might already be awesome, and I bet you are, but just if you put in the work, that story Pam said, you walk around, if it's tennis or if it's lacrosse and you're trying to do that weird thing where you can pick the ball up that I'm sure Hannah can do with both of her hands and maybe one of even her feet. She couldn't do that until she did it 386 times. So with the repetition, you're going to get better. Keep working.
Practice makes perfect. All right, Paula, what's your advice?
That you're going to fail and that teaches you something, and use it to get better. Like I always think that effort is the one thing you can control. And sort of, I think Rachel said it, do everything you can to do the best you can, but understand that when you have a setback, it just teaches you how to do it differently. I think when I was younger, I thought that if I failed, the end of the world was happening, but it's not. It just teaches you what you have to do better to be more successful. So that's it. Just take those setbacks and understand that it's a process, and that every day you'll get a little bit better from it. It's just a process. Don't be hung up on the wins and losses all the time.
You have to enjoy the journey as well. All right, Pam, advice time.
Well, it's funny you just said the joy is the journey. My freshman year at UMass, I had a grad student friend who played on the basketball team. And the one thing she was giving the young kid, advice was, it's about the journey. It's not about the destination. In fact, I still have it. I think it's in my office. She wrote it out. And that has been my mantra, through all the trials and tribulations of my playing career as well as my coaching career. And that is really, you got to love the journey. And Rachel, I couldn't agree with you more. Like the passion still has to be there and the love has to be there. And some of these kids get so caught up in the importance of this. And it's like, it's a game, or it's something you're supposed to have fun doing. And you can have fun in the competition. That's the important thing too. And somebody asked, I saw one of the questions is, what if you could put it in one word, what do you get? It's actually two words. And it's called chaos control. Or my mom would wake up every morning going, what is it going to be today? She's a New Englander, right? Like, what is it going to be today? What are we going to have to deal with? And you know what? I used to think it was this awful thing, but I say it with this, like, I'm ready for it, because with kids, your own kids, or you're coaching, college athletics, COVID, whatever it is, what is it going to be today? And be ready for that challenge and take it on. And just like Paula said, you're going to find a new way to do it, and you're going to find a better way to do it, and you're going to learn from it. So you can't expect it. The kids have it all lined up. This is how it's supposed to be. I planned it out. That's going to get blown up in a heartbeat. And you need to be flexible, and you need to be ready to not necessarily have a plan B, because you might not be able to, but you got to think on your feet. And then you got to find the joy in that challenge. you know, there's going to be a challenge that's going to be like, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but I figured it out and I'm better for it. And so it's chaos control, and what is it going to be today? And let's bring it on. Let's go and have an attitude that you're gonna be able to face it. You know, you're gonna be able to take it on and enjoy that. Yeah, I just think really important to be able to think on your feet and get excited about a challenge that maybe you didn't expect.
And just going off of that, I always say people, oh yeah, they would always ask, did you go to UMass for broadcast journalism? And I was like, no, I was a double major in business. And if I was so focused on the end goal, which isn't, it's so important to have goals, absolutely. But if I didn't even explore kind of the ups and downs of what happened in my career, I would never be doing what I was doing now. If I was so focused on just going from A to B. And I'm so lucky that I had, you know, the mindset to say, well, this isn't what I was planning on doing, but let me just explore it and see what happens. And I couldn't be happier, you know, with the opportunities that I was given. So great advice there, Pam. And last but not least, I want to get the advice from Hannah on this question.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, Katie, when I was 12, I just remember it was constant, like going to tournaments and camps and just overwhelming with recruiting. And when you're so young like that, and people want to know like where are you thinking about for college? And when you think about like 12, 13, that is so young to start thinking about that. But I know that that's probably starting to creep in a little bit. So for me, when there's so many outside distractions and so much going on, I always come back to like find your why. Like, why are you running track and field? Like, why is that what you want to do? What are you motivated by? Like, what gets you up in the morning to go out to the track? Like, what is the why? And if you can find your why and your purpose for what you're doing, that helps, because there's going to be so many times where like you don't want to go to the track. Like you don't want to put in that extra rep. Like you just don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to do it. And like if you can resort back to your why in those moments, that will push you through those difficult times, and just kind of, and it'll, on top of athletics in life, it just helps you just keep on keeping on. And for me, it's helped me with lacrosse, and it's also helped me in my career. So I would just say, obviously work hard, all that stuff, but definitely just find your why and that purpose.
I just want to read a message real quick before I let you all go. Susan is one of our attendees on our conference, and she said, when I was applying to medical school in 1985, the interviewer was more interested in hearing about my athletic experience than any of my academic courses. The lessons that I learned on the playing field allowed me to persevere through 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, and I've now been a physician for 32 years. So I think that just is a perfect sum up of how athletics and just being a team member in some capacity is able to shape your career and your path. And I couldn't be more thankful to spend this evening with all of you. And I know that I've taken a lot away from this conversation. I know that some people had some questions about if there was a way to reach out to our panelists. So I would imagine that everyone on here probably has a LinkedIn or a social media following in some capacity. So I'm sure that if you're interested in reaching out to any of our panelists, that we can connect you in those ways. And I just want to thank you all. I mean, it's an hour out of your time, but the fact that you made this hour important enough to sit here and hear these conversations, these very important conversations, I can't thank you enough for joining us. And to our panelists, thank you so much. You're all incredibly inspiring and doing an amazing job in your selected career path. So thank you for joining us, and let's keep celebrating women in sports.